Have you ever stopped to think that your blood pressure medicine might not be fighting alone? I mean, really think about it. Because for a lot of people over 60, the story they tell themselves is very simple. The number was high, the doctor prescribed the pill is supposed to handle the problem, and that's the end of it. But in real life, it almost never works that cleanly. Because the medicine is doing one thing, and then breakfast is doing another. Lunch is doing another. That healthy snack in the afternoon is doing another. And sometimes the food wins. Not because the medication is weak, not because your prescription is wrong, but because food can change what your body does with that medicine. It can change how much of it gets absorbed. It can change how your kidneys handle fluid. It can change your sodium balance, your potassium balance, your blood vessel tone, even the concentration of the drug that ends up circulating in your blood. And after 60, that matters more than most people realize. Because as you get older, your body does not handle medications in exactly the same way it did at 35 or 40. Blood flow changes, kidney function can change, liver processing can slow down. A lot of people are also taking more than one prescription at the same time, sometimes for blood pressure, cholesterol, blood sugar, heart rhythm, reflux, arthritis, all layered together. So the margin for little daily mistakes gets smaller, and the consequences of those mistakes get bigger. What I want to do today is very simple, but very important. I want to walk you through 11 foods and drinks that can quietly interfere with blood pressure medication after 60. Some of them raise blood pressure directly. Some of them make certain medications less predictable. Some of them don't exactly cancel the pill, but they push your body in the opposite direction hard enough that your treatment has to work much harder than it should. And a few of them are going to surprise you, because one of the most deceptive items on this list is often marketed as the healthier choice. So let's build this carefully from the ground up. The first thing to understand is that blood pressure medicine is not one single kind of medicine. Some drugs lower pressure by helping your blood vessels relax. Some help your body get rid of extra sodium and water. Some slow the heart down. Some interfere with hormonal signals that normally tighten blood vessels and retain fluid. Different medications, different mechanisms. And foods can interfere with those mechanisms in four main ways. First, they can directly raise blood pressure, which means your medicine now has to push against a stronger opposing force. Second, they can change how much of the drug gets absorbed in your gut. Third, they can make drug levels too high or too low, by interfering with enzymes or transporters in the digestive system. And fourth, they can change mineral balance, especially sodium and potassium, in ways that make certain blood pressure medications less safe, less stable, or less effective. Once you understand those four routes, this whole list starts to make sense. So let's start with one of the best-known interactions, because even though people have heard of it, most don't really understand what it means. Number 1, grapefruit and grapefruit juice. Grapefruit has this strange reputation where people know it doesn't mix with some medicines, but they don't know why, so they either ignore the warning or treat it like an old wives' tale. It is not an old wives' tale. Compounds in grapefruit can interfere with an enzyme in the small intestine that normally helps break down certain medications before they fully enter the bloodstream. When that enzyme gets blocked, more of the drug can enter circulation than expected. And with some blood pressure medications, especially certain calcium channel blockers, that can make the medicine act in a way that becomes less predictable. Now, you might be thinking, wait, wouldn't more drug mean stronger blood pressure lowering? Sometimes, yes, temporarily. But this is where people oversimplify the issue. The problem is not just whether the drug goes up or down. The problem is that the medication stops behaving the way it was intended to behave. Blood levels become less stable. Side effects become more likely. Heart rate and blood pressure responses can shift in ways that are no longer consistent with the dose on the label. That is not good control. That is chaos wearing a healthy food costume. And this matters because grapefruit is exactly the kind of food people reach for when they are trying to eat better. It looks clean. It looks heart-friendly. It looks like the responsible choice. But if you are taking the wrong blood pressure medication with it, the issue is not whether grapefruit is nutritious in general. The issue is whether it belongs in that specific medication routine. And that leads directly to number 2, because this one hides in plain sight. Number 2, Seville orange marmalade, pomelos, and tangelos. This is the part almost nobody sees coming. When people hear grapefruit interaction, they think, fine, I don't eat grapefruit, so I'm in the clear. But certain citrus relatives can create similar problems. Seville oranges, which are often used in marmalade, are not the same thing as the sweet oranges most people picture. Pomelos and tangelos can also fall into this conversation. So someone can avoid grapefruit for years, then spread a thick layer of orange marmalade on toast every morning and never once think they may still be stepping into the same kind of interaction territory. This is why I always say health information becomes much more useful when it gets specific. General advice sounds clean, but reality is messy. Avoid grapefruit sounds simple. Some grapefruit-like citrus products may also interfere depending on the medication, sounds more annoying, but it's much more true. And if you are over 60, that detail matters, because a lot of medication trouble in later life doesn't come from one dramatic mistake. It comes from small, reasonable, repeated assumptions. I don't eat grapefruit. This is just marmalade. This is just a fruit. This is just breakfast. And then the pattern repeats for months. Now let me move to a food-drug interaction that is much less famous, but in some ways more fascinating. Number 3. Orange juice with certain beta blockers, especially atenolol. This one catches people off guard because orange juice doesn't sound threatening at all. If anything, it sounds wholesome. Something you would give a child. Something you'd serve at breakfast when you're trying to do the healthy thing. But with certain medications, orange juice can reduce how much of the drug gets absorbed from the gut into the bloodstream. One of the clearest examples studied is atenolol, a beta blocker used in some people for blood pressure and heart-related conditions. In controlled research, orange juice significantly lowered the amount of atenolol that entered the blood. Think about what that means for a moment. You swallow the pill. You think the medication is in your system doing its job. But if the drink you washed it down with reduced absorption, then the actual dose your body experiences may be quite a bit lower than the dose you believe you took. That's the kind of interaction people never feel happening in real time. It doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly shifts the math. And that is a theme you're going to notice throughout this entire video. The most important food interactions are often invisible. They don't feel dramatic. They feel ordinary. They happen inside the digestive tract, at the level of transport proteins, fluid balance, hormone signaling, and blood vessel response, which is exactly why they matter so much. Now let's talk about one of the strangest items on this list, because this one sounds almost too old-fashioned to still be relevant. Number 4. Black licorice candy. I know, it sounds like something from another era, but stay with me, because the biology here is remarkable. Real licorice root contains a compound that can interfere with an enzyme involved in cortisol metabolism. And when that happens, your body can start acting as if there is excess mineralocorticoid activity. In plain English, that means more sodium retention, more water retention, more potassium loss, and a stronger tendency for blood pressure to rise. That is a brutal combination if you are already taking medicine to lower blood pressure, because now the medication is trying to bring pressure down while the licorice is nudging your body toward holding on to salt and fluid and tightening the internal environment in the opposite direction. It is like trying to row upstream while someone quietly turns the current against you. And the reason I don't want you to dismiss this is that some people eat black licorice in surprisingly large amounts without really registering it as a physiological event. It's candy. It feels harmless. It's a treat after dinner. It's a movie snack. It's a nostalgic food. But candy can still be pharmacology when the plant compounds are active enough. There have been cases where heavy licorice intake was linked to severe spikes in blood pressure that became genuinely dangerous. So this is not a cute little fun fact interaction. For the right person, in the right quantity, it can be a real problem. And if the candy version is one problem, the next version is even sneakier. Number 5. Licorice tea and herbal licorice products. This one worries me more than the candy, honestly, because the tea and herbal world often comes wrapped in a halo of wellness. People are cautious with medication labels, but oddly casual with herbal products. If it's sold as tea, people assume it must be gentle. If it says natural, they assume it must be safe. But your body does not use the words natural and harmless as synonyms. If an herbal tea contains real licorice root, the same blood pressure raising mechanism can still matter. And in some cases, people use these teas repeatedly, day after day, because they think they are doing something soothing for digestion, stress, or sleep, without realizing they may be quietly working against their blood pressure plan. This is especially important after 60 because herbal products are often not mentally counted as part of the medication picture. People remember to tell the doctor about their prescription. They forget to mention the tea, the supplement, the sleep blend, the digestive tonic, the all-natural drops in the cabinet. But from the body's point of view, if it changes hormone signaling, sodium handling, or potassium balance, it counts. Now I want to pivot to what may be the most deceptive food on the list, because this one is sold as the healthier swap, and for some people it is exactly the wrong move. Number 6. Potassium-based salt substitutes. This is the one I really want you to pay attention to. A lot of salt substitutes replace sodium chloride with potassium chloride. On paper, that sounds smart. Less sodium, more potassium, better blood pressure, right? Sometimes, but only in the right person, with the right kidneys, on the right medications. Because several common blood pressure medicines, especially ACE inhibitors, ARBS, and potassium-sparing diuretics, can already increase potassium levels in the body. That means if you start adding potassium-based salt substitutes on top of those medications, you may be creating a mineral imbalance your body cannot comfortably handle. Now, technically, this is not a less effective problem in the simplest sense. It is a less safe and less stable problem. But that instability matters because good blood pressure treatment depends on the medication being used in the biological environment it was designed for. If potassium drifts too high, the whole treatment picture changes. Dosing decisions change, monitoring changes, symptoms can show up that people don't immediately connect to food. And what makes this so tricky is that the person using the salt substitute is usually trying to help themselves. They read that sodium is bad for blood pressure. True. They buy the substitute. They sprinkle it on eggs, soup, vegetables, everything. And nobody told them that depending on their medication, the substitute may not be neutral. This is one of those perfect examples of why health advice without context can backfire. A better choice for one person can be the wrong choice for another. Now that brings us naturally to sodium itself, because if potassium substitutes are one side of the mineral story, excess sodium is the other. And this is where things get brutally practical. Because when people ask, what foods make blood pressure medicine less effective, the biggest category, by sheer everyday impact, is not exotic fruit. It is hidden sodium. Not the salt shaker you see, the sodium you don't. So let's get specific. Number 7, deli meats and cured meats. Ham, turkey slices, salami, bologna, pepperoni, bacon, sausage. These foods are so normalized that people forget they are often salt delivery systems disguised as convenience. Here's the problem. A lot of blood pressure medications are, in one way or another, trying to reduce the strain created by excess fluid volume or excess vessel tension. Sodium pushes in the opposite direction by helping the body retain water. More retained fluid means more volume inside the circulation, and more volume means more pressure against vessel walls. So when someone takes their morning blood pressure pill and then eats a deli meat sandwich, or bacon and sausage, or a processed meat breakfast several days a week, they are not just having a salty meal. They are recreating the very pressure environment the medicine is trying to lower. And after 60, many people become more salt sensitive, which means the same amount of sodium can move the needle more than it used to. That's why this matters so much. It is not only about whether a food is high in sodium on paper, it is about what your aging cardiovascular system does with that sodium. Number 8, canned soups and salty broths. This is one of the most innocent-looking traps in the grocery store. Soup feels soft, light, easy, especially for older adults who want something simple for lunch or dinner. If appetite is lower, if chewing is harder, if cooking feels tiring, soup becomes a default food. And that would be fine if many commercial soups were not absolutely loaded with sodium. So a person can think, I'm eating modestly, I'm not overeating, I'm just having soup. But if that soup is carrying a massive sodium load, then what you're really doing is giving your body a fluid retention signal while expecting your medication to keep pressure down anyway. And this is where people get confused. They say, I'm taking the medicine exactly like I'm supposed to. Why is my blood pressure still high? Sometimes the answer is not the pill. Sometimes the answer is the broth. That is what I mean when I say food can make medication less effective. Not by chemically destroying the drug, but by creating internal conditions that keep pushing the body back uphill. Number 9, pizza. Pizza deserves its own place on this list because it is a perfect storm food for blood pressure control. Think about what pizza usually contains. Salt in the crust, salt in the sauce, salt in the cheese, salt in the processed meats on top. Often large portions, often eaten at night, often followed by fluid retention the next morning. And because pizza is so socially normal, people don't even mentally file it under salty. They file it under dinner. But if you are over 60 and taking medication for hypertension, pizza can be one of those foods that makes you think the medicine isn't doing enough, when really the meal itself was structured to oppose blood pressure control from multiple angles at once. I'm not saying one slice of pizza ruins everything. That kind of exaggerated health language is not helpful. What I am saying is that if pizza is frequent, or if it is one of several high-sodium foods appearing across the same week, it can absolutely become part of the reason a medication seems less impressive than it should. Number 10. Salty snacks like chips, crackers, and packaged savory foods. This category is dangerous precisely because the portions are so easy to underestimate. Nobody sits down with a bowl of crackers and thinks, this is a serious cardiovascular event. But these foods are compact, processed, easy to overeat, and often heavily salted. And unlike a meal, they slip into the day almost invisibly. A handful here, a few more there, a bag in the car, crackers with cheese, chips during a game, popcorn from a packet. By the end of the day, the sodium total can be far higher than the person realizes. And because these foods don't feel substantial, they don't trigger the same caution people might apply to obviously indulgent meals. But physiologically, the body still counts the sodium. The kidneys still count the sodium. The blood vessels still count the sodium. Your blood pressure medication definitely counts the sodium. This is the kind of habit that can make a treatment plan look weaker than it really is. And now we get to number 11, which is less a single food and more a category of everyday meals that quietly sabotage control. Number 11, restaurant and convenience meals built around hidden sodium. Fast food burgers, burritos and tacos, frozen mixed dishes, prepared pasta meals, takeout combinations. The reason I'm grouping these together is that they all create the same practical problem. The sodium is often built into the structure of the meal, not sprinkled on top where you can see it. This is why eating not that much can still translate into a very high sodium day. Because the sandwich bread has sodium, the sauce has sodium, the cheese has sodium, the meat has sodium, the seasoning packet has sodium, the side has sodium, the frozen meal sauce has sodium, the restaurant marinade has sodium. And when people rely on these foods regularly, the medication is trying to lower blood pressure in a body that keeps getting repeated sodium signals from multiple directions. It's like lowering the thermostat while someone keeps opening the oven door. Now, before we go any further, I want to make an important distinction because I don't want this video to turn into one of those fear-based lists where every food sounds dangerous. The point is not that these foods are universally forbidden. The point is that blood pressure control is not happening in a vacuum. If you are over 60, the question is not just, did I take my pill? The question is, what internal environment did I create around that pill? Did you take a medication meant to help regulate pressure while also eating foods that drive up sodium, alter potassium, interfere with absorption, or destabilize drug levels? Because if you did, the medication may still work, but it has to work harder, and sometimes it won't look nearly as effective as it should. And this is where I think the conversation becomes genuinely useful. Because once you understand the mechanisms, you stop thinking in cartoon health categories like good food, bad food, healthy food, unhealthy food. You start thinking in interaction categories. This citrus affects metabolism. This juice affects absorption. This candy affects hormone handling. This salt substitute affects potassium. This meal drives sodium high enough to push against the drug. That is a much more intelligent way to look at your own routine. Now, let me give you the deeper pattern underneath all 11 of these foods, because I think this is the part that actually sticks. There are really three major traps here. Trap number one is the healthy halo trap. That is grapefruit, orange juice, herbal tea, salt substitutes. Foods that sound beneficial in isolation, but are not automatically beneficial inside a specific medication routine. Trap number two is the ordinary habit trap. That is the sandwich meat, the canned soup, the pizza night, the snack crackers, the frozen dinner. Things people stop noticing because they are familiar. And trap number three is the invisible accumulation trap. This is when no single meal looks catastrophic, but the repeated daily pattern builds an internal environment that keeps blood pressure harder to control than it needs to be. That is what makes this topic so important after 60. Not one dramatic event, repetition. And the truth is, repetition is exactly how blood pressure becomes dangerous in the first place. It is not usually one stressful afternoon. It is years of small patterns. Which also means improvement often starts the same way, not with perfection, but with pattern correction. So what should you actually take away from this? First, don't assume a food is harmless just because it sounds natural, light, or healthy. Second, don't assume a food-medication interaction always feels obvious. Some of the most important ones happen silently. Third, if you take a blood pressure medication, know which class it belongs to. Is it a calcium channel blocker, an ACE inhibitor, an ARB, a beta blocker, a diuretic? That single piece of knowledge makes the entire food conversation more specific and more useful. Fourth, pay special attention to what happens at breakfast, because that is where several of these interactions cluster. Juice with medication, marmalade with toast, salt substitute on eggs, processed meats on the plate, coffee and other habits layered around the pill. Morning routines become automatic very quickly, which means they become powerful very quickly too. And finally, remember that after 60, the body often has less room for sloppy chemistry. That doesn't mean your body is fragile. It means your body is honest. It reflects the interactions more clearly. It reflects the sodium load more clearly. It reflects the absorption issue more clearly. It reflects the stacking of medications and habits more clearly. And I actually find that encouraging, because it means the system is responsive. If a repeated food habit can quietly make control worse, then changing that repeated food habit can quietly make control better. Sometimes people think health only improves through massive dramatic overhauls, but blood pressure often responds to much simpler realities than that. Less hidden sodium, fewer interaction foods, better consistency, more awareness of what medication is actually being taken and what it is being taken with. That is not glamorous advice, but it is powerful advice. So tomorrow, when you open the fridge or pour your breakfast drink or season your food, I want you to remember something very simple. Your medication is not operating in isolation. It is entering a chemical environment that you help create every single day. And some of the foods on this list are not just passive background items. They are active participants in that environment, sometimes pushing with the medicine, sometimes pushing against it. Once you see that, you stop treating food like a side note and start treating it like part of the blood pressure story itself. And honestly, that shift in perspective may be more valuable than memorizing any single item on this list. Because once you understand the principle, you begin noticing the pattern everywhere. So if this video helped you look at your medication routine in a different way, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And if you want, Leave a comment telling me which of these 11 foods surprised you most, because for most people, it's usually either the orange juice, the licorice, or the salt substitute. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.